Now, I have observed by studying people who are successful, and I've had probably more opportunity to study successful people at close range than any other man living today. I have observed that they think constantly in terms of things they can do, never in terms of things they can't do. I once asked Henry Ford if there was anything he wanted to do that he couldn't do. He said, "Why, no, I don't think about the things I can't do. I think about the things I can do." Now, the majority of people, however, are not like that. They think about the things they can't do and worry about them, and consequently, they can't do them. They think about the money they don't have and worry about it, and consequently, they don't have it and never get it. You know, money is a peculiar thing, isn't it? Somehow or another, it just doesn't follow the fellow around that doesn't believe he's got a right to get it. I wonder why that is. Money is a kind of an inanimate thing. I don't believe it's the fault of the money. I don't think the fault's there. I think it's in the mind of the person who doubts that he can get it. I notice that when students of mine start believing that they can do things, it starts to change their entire financial condition. I notice that when they don't believe they can do things, they don't do them. So the whole purpose of this philosophy is to induce my students to build up habits of belief in themselves and in their ability to direct their minds to whatever they want in life, and to keep their minds off the things they don't want. If you don't know too much about Mahatma Gandhi, it'd be a good idea for you to get a book and read up on the life of Mahatma Gandhi. There's a man who didn't have anything to fight the British with except his own mind. He didn't have any soldiers, he didn't have any money, he didn't have any military equipment, he didn't even own a pair of breeches. And yet he put to rout the great British Empire with his mind power, just resisting them. He didn't want them, he didn't accept them, and finally the British picked up, they got the big idea and got out. Surprising how many individuals will do that when you set your mind against them. You don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything, you just have to say in your own mind, I don't want that person in my life, and eventually he'll get out, sometimes very quickly. I'm telling you, this mind power stuff, it's powerful, it's potent, it's marvelous, it's profound if you want to become acquainted with it and start using it. Now, this philosophy is the medium by which one's thought habits may be controlled until they are taken over by cosmic habit force. And it is well to here call attention to the fact that no one has ever been known to become financially independent without having first established a prosperity consciousness, just as no one may remain physically well without having first established a health consciousness. I remember so well my greatest difficulty when I started out with Andrew Carnegie. My greatest difficulty was forgetting that I was born in poverty and illiteracy and ignorance. It took me a long time to forget the little mountain hut in the mountains of Wise County, Virginia, where I was born. Long time before I could forget about that and get it out of my system. And always when I'd start out to interview an outstanding man, I'd think, oh, well, I'm so insignificant. When I come into his presence, I guess I'll be ashamed and afraid because I remembered where I came from. I remembered my poverty. It was a long time before I could shake that poverty off. But finally I did it. And when I began to think in terms of opulence, I began to say then, well, why wouldn't Mr. Edison see me? Why wouldn't Mr. Wanamaker see me? Because I'm just as big in my field as he is in his. I not only felt that, ladies and gentlemen, but I saw the day when I made it come true. It's an achievement when you can reach out and influence the lives of millions of people all over the world beneficially. I say that's an achievement. And I say it never would have been done if I hadn't changed the habits, thoughts of Napoleon Hill. That was my biggest job. Believe me, my biggest job was not getting in to see the men of affairs and to get their collaboration. That was easy. My biggest job was to change the habits of thinking of Napoleon Hill. And had I not changed those habits, the books that I have written that inspire millions of people never would have had the effect that they had. Because when an author writes a book or makes a speech, the exact mental attitude that he's in when he's speaking or writing is conveyed to his audience, and no man lives who is smart enough to keep that audience from picking up the thoughts. You read a book that anybody writes, and you'll have impressions about that writer as you read that book. And you couldn't possibly read one of my books without knowing down deep in your heart that I'm dealing with fundamental principles, as fundamental as infinite intelligence itself. You know that. You don't need anybody to prove it to you. And before I could write books of that kind, I had to completely build over my thought processes, my habits of thinking, and learn to keep my mind on the things that were positive and keep it on there automatically. Fixations of fear and faith. Did you know that each one of you came over to this plane with a marvelous doctoring system of your own? Did you know that? A chemist, don't you know, that breaks up your food and distributes it, takes out of it the things that nature needs? And did you know that if you think right, eat right, exercise right, and live right, you know that this doctor inside of you does everything else automatically? I don't care what you call it. It's a system that nature gave you for balancing everything that you need to keep your body in fine condition all the time. But you have to do your part. Now, faith, a fixation's a wonderful thing if it doesn't happen to be a negative fixation. But you want to look out for these fixations of fear and self-limitations, the things that you can't do, the fear of criticism or the fear of anything else. But if you want to make use of fixation and benefit by the law of cosmic habit force in doing so, go to work on the fixation of faith. Fixation of applied faith. Now there's a fixation you can tie to. And there's a fixation, if you tie to it properly, when you reach out there and call for the things you need, you'll find them always in place. If they're not where you thought they were, they'll be close at hand. By all means, cultivate that kind of a fixation. Don't let it get away from you by neglect. How do you go about making a fixation of anything? Any thought habit? How do you go about it? Repetition, that's right, and applying it in everything you do and think and say. Repetition. Some of you are old enough to have remembered the Coué formula. Day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. Millions of people all over this country were saying that. And it didn't amount to a tinker's dam unless the person saying it believed it. It wasn't what he said that counted, it was what he thought while he was saying it. And there were a lot of people that said it over and over again and then finally turned thumbs down on it because they said, oh, it didn't work for me because I didn't believe in it in the first place. You can understand why it didn't work. It makes no difference what formula you use or whether you use any oral formula or not, as long as your thought patterns are positive and you can repeat them over and over again. I want you to follow the habits of thinking in positive terms until cosmic habit force takes up your mental attitude and makes it predominantly positive and not predominantly negative. The circumstances of life are such that the majority of people their minds are predominantly negative all the time. Now what you want to do is to change all of that and make the mind predominantly positive all the time. So no matter what you want, you can turn on the power and get some response from infinite intelligence. Infinite intelligence is not going to do anything for you while you're in a state of anger, no matter how much right you have to be angry. Infinite intelligence is not going to do anything for you, but she's going to let you do something to yourself if you keep yourself in a state of a negative mind. You can't afford to go into action. You can't afford to go into expression. You can't afford to have human relationships while you're in a negative mental attitude. And the best way to keep from being in the negative mental attitude is to start to build up these positive habits and to let cosmic habit force take them over and make them predominant in your mind. Here are the negatives that you should avoid making into fixations. Poverty, imaginary illness, laziness, just plain everyday garden variety of laziness. You know what a lazy man is? He's a man who hasn't found a labor of love. That's right. No lazy people except those who haven't found something they like to do. Of course, some of them are pretty hard to please. They go all the way through life and have an alibi. They don't like this, they don't like that. As a matter of fact, they don't like anything, period. They are lazy. And envy and greed and anger and hatred and jealousy and dishonesty and drifting without aim or purpose. irritability of mental attitude in general, vanity, arrogance, cynicism, sadism, and the will to injure others. Now, those are things that become fixation in the lives of most people, and you can't afford to have that kind of a fixation. You just can't afford it. It's too expensive. Even as a student of the science of success, I'd still say it's too expensive for you. You can't have that kind of a habit or fixation. But down here are the positives that you can afford to have, and you can't afford not to have them. The definiteness of a major purpose in life heads the list. Make it a fixation by all means. Eat it, sleep it, drink it, and indulge in some act every day of your life leading in the direction of your overall major purpose in life. And faith, personal initiative, enthusiasm, willingness to go the extra mile, imagination, the traits of a pleasing personality, accurate thinking, and all the other traits recommended in this philosophy of individual achievement. Now, those are the things that you can afford to make into fixations so that they dominate your mind. You live by them. You think by them. And you act by them. You relate yourself to people by them. And you'll be surprised at how quickly you can give yourselves changed lives. You'll be surprised at how quickly the people who have tried to injure you will, of their own accord, fall away and become ineffective and impotent. You'll be surprised at how potent you'll become, how you'll attract to you new opportunities. You'll be surprised at how quickly you'll solve your problems when they arise. And you wonder why you didn't do it before. Instead of worrying over your problem, why you just didn't get busy and dissolve it or solve it. On every one of those, you'll notice every one is under your control, subject to your control as a result of repetition of thought. That's all you have to do. Just keep repeating it over and over and over again and put some action behind the thought. Words without deeds, are dead. Engage in some sort of action. One should develop fixations by all means, but one should take care to see that they are fixations on the subject of that which one wants, not that which one does not want. Isn't it a strange thing that the majority of people go all the way through life with getting everything they don't want and very few things that they do want? Isn't that funny? You know a lot of people who don't get the mate in marriage that they really want after they get him or her and find out about it. I know a lot of people like that. I know a lot of people who don't get out of their jobs what they want. I know a lot of people who do not get out of their profession what they want. They'd like to have more patience and better patience with better dispositions. Incidentally, there's an idea. Do you know how a professional man, like a dentist or a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, how he goes about attracting a lot of patients that are agreeable to get along with? Wonderful patients, pay their bills promptly and all that sort of thing. Do you know how he does it?
Be that way himself.
Yeah, be that way himself. That's right. You said a mouthful. That's the idea. In other words, the effect starts with the professional man himself. His own mental attitude toward his clients or his patients is what determines what they do toward him. No getting away from that. That's absolutely true. That happens to a merchant, happens to a man or woman in a job or any other person, in any other connection. In other words, if you want to reform people, don't start with the people, start with you. And get your mental attitude right, and you'll find that the others will fall in line. They can't do anything about it. As a matter of fact, if your mind is positive, the negative-minded person can't influence you in the least. There's nothing he can do about it. A positive-minded person is always the master of the negative-minded person.